Hey everyone, welcome back. I picked up the Tenet Grigori literally on day 1, but I haven't uploaded a video on it until now. While it is a very good weapon outright as is and can compete with Reaper Prime, it was only recently that I realized something. I've honestly just been too busy to play with it, but a friend of mine said that I should take a look at it because the heavy slide glaive on it seems bugged. Oh yeah, so when you heavy slide on this weapon, it launches a glaive. Ironically, this is actually exactly how you aerial heavy attack Eidolons in the air to break Synovia, so this new quote-unquote feature was already pretty natural to me. Now back to this thing. My friend basically told me that the Agendus is busted and extremely strong on the projectile it can shoot out, but that Grigori was very lackluster. Over the past day, I played with it a little bit and I realized I've seen something like this before. It actually uses Quasis's old math on launch, so I actually knew what I was getting into. More on that later. This video will focus more so on the glaive throwing aspect, but I will be including sections for the normal attacking builds. So let's take a closer look at this weapon. Tenet Grigori is a scythe with above average attack speed. It has decent critical chance and subpar critical multiplier, but well, because this is a melee and actually the raw power of the glaive and the massive base damage, its low critical multiplier is mostly irrelevant. Crits are still going to be king here. It also has sky high base status at 38%. This means it really wants to sit at 12x combo no matter what build you use. Weeping Wound alone pushes the total status up to 205.8% at 12x combo. This is extremely good because Grigori is a slash based weapon. While the stance and standard heavy has 4 slash, the glaive that shoots out does not. Notice that scythes have a follow-through stat of 0.6. This kinda sucks. It means every extra enemy you hit per swing with the scythe will do multiplicatively 60% less total damage. So the first enemy takes 100%, second takes 60, third takes 36, fourth takes 21.6, fifth takes 13, etc. This isn't the worst follow-through stat value, but it does mean in a group of enemies in Steel Path, your maxed out 12x heavy attack still isn't going to kill more than 4, maybe 5 enemies at most per swing. This is decent honestly, but this is also where the glaive comes in, as it completely ignores the follow-through stat, meaning every enemy it hits will take full damage. What's interesting is that the glaive itself seems to have a very wide hitbox radius. It's definitely over 3 meters, somewhere around 3.5. It's pretty huge, as that's even more than the base range of the scythe itself at 2.5. Also, another cool thing about this weapon is the Random Attaché system. When holstered, the combo timer freezes. This means it will stay forever at whatever combo you last used it at, so long as it is holstered. For disruption where DPS can be low, this is perfect for dealing with Demolists, which often have a lot of downtime between them. It also means you don't need to find an enemy to hit to keep the combo up, you just have to pull back out your gun. Now let's take a look at the damage distribution, shall we? For a normal weapon, it has 228 base damage, 136.8 of that is slash, so it has an innate 60% slash bias, which is pretty decent. But we need to remember this is a lich weapon, so it actually gets up to a 60% elemental bonus. This will significantly increase the base damage, meaning the slash procs also. I did check the math and the total DPS with slash procs at 25% versus 60% are near equal, with 60% just barely pulling ahead. So again, something supremely tanky, which doesn't really exist in this game currently due to the armor ignore and slash, they're basically the same. What I didn't mention though is that this is a trade-off of bigger slash procs in exchange for less slash procs from the element progenitor, which will dilute the slash weight. Because slash procs are generally big enough as is on scythes no matter what, the question is less how big you slash and more so did you proc slash or not, as any slash proc will kill them when using a scythe. So for this reason, if you're about reliability and slash procking frequency, then go ahead and make 25% progenitors. I would recommend either Toxin or Impact. Toxin because it bypasses Corpus shields and gives you the option to make viral slash with one slot if you so choose. This way you're not entirely reliant on slash procs to kill everything. None of the other elements really help as much as Toxin. Impact is another choice, but only if you roll a minus impact driven so you can preserve the original slash weight of around 60%. You're basically aiming to get a 25% impact to keep it as low as possible and easily remove it with minus impact. That said, finding a Grigori Riven with minus impact and actually getting a near 25% impact Grigori is near impossible because these weapons are untradeable. Valence Fusion forces your percentage up, and while the odds of lower percentage bonuses are more common, having both impact and low percentage is going to be a rare sight, especially we can only get 2 of these a week. So just keep this in mind. If you see Ergo Glass selling a lower percentage impact Grigori, or any of the other Tenet melees for that matter, pick it up. It's most likely a once in a lifetime chance you'll see it, and it's better to have it for the day you happen to finally find a minus impact Riven, rather than finding that Riven and not having the weapon, as like I said, they're untradeable and only available twice a week. The positive stats don't even matter, just getting minus impact at all is a massive boon to the weapon and makes it significantly better. Now if you are looking to take this weapon as far as it can go, just work towards a 60% toxin. Both are extremely good already and this is much more practical. There isn't a massive difference between 25% and 60% toxin, but 25% will still kill trash mobs a little bit easier by proccing slash more often. All of what I said works for both as a normal weapon and also for the Glaive throw. Speaking of the Glaive throw, after testing I can conclude the Glaive actually doesn't have the same IPS distribution as the swing of Grigori itself. I have a strong feeling it's an even split of IPS and that any elements you mod on will scale off of that, so 33% impact, puncture, and slash. This also explains why electric procs are so often here, as a 60% electric progenitor would push the new distribution to 20.8% impact, puncture, and slash, and 37.5% electric. This also strengthens the reason why minus impact would be so useful, as slash has even lower relative weight on the glaive than the swing. So I own a 60% electric Grigori. I'm waiting on the toxin one to appear. Keep in mind that the full potential of this weapon is even more than what I showed today. This is normal attack 12x build I'm using, condition overload, because even if you don't use a primer, this weapon still has over 200% status at 12x combo and will be proccing at least 3 statuses itself, which is already 240% base damage and ahead of prime pressure point. Because we can't make viral, I've opted to just increase the range of Grigori. This makes it more comfortable to use and easier to rebuild combo if you choose the heavy. Amalgam Organ Shatter helps with that wind-up if you choose to go for it. If I did have an 8 toxin, you have the choice to slot in a cold 60-60 and place a primed reach if you want viral on the build, or you can just leave it like this if you're offloading viral to another primer or panzer, or just don't need one in general. Besides that, this weapon does reach 129.6% critical chance at 12x combo. You won't see much else besides mostly yellows and a few oranges, but the sheer amount of slash procs will more than make up for it. This particular build will sit at 228% status. Even at 1.08 base attack speed, scythes are insanely slow weapons at base, so I've opted for Prime Fury instead of Berserker. Since this weapon is very annoying to ramp back up if Berserker buff falls off, whereas 55% attack speed buff is more than enough for it to feel decent. Carnus Mandible restores my slash weight to make up for the electric progenitor. A minus impact ribbon on a impact Grigori would actually free up this slot for another mod, maybe Gladiator Might or something. Anyways, the last slot is Flex and I've chosen Primed Bane since this weapon is so heavily slash focused and slash DOTs still double dip on Banes. Otherwise, you could slot, I don't know, Gladiator Might or True Punishment to recover from heavies. It's all up to you. For the stance, Reaping Spiral is the obvious choice because of faster attacks than Stalking Fan and much more abundant innate slash procs. This weapon makes pretty much good mincemeat out of these enemies. I don't have much I'm going to showcase here, as this is your cookie cutter slash based light attack melee and isn't the main purpose of this video. Also, make sure to use Nairmon for power spike so that your combo counter doesn't decay completely. So let's move on to the 12x heavy build. This is what most people use scythes for because their heavies have both a 6x base damage multiplier and also 4 slash. It will generally one-shot anything you touch and even more so if you use a primer, but that honestly isn't even really needed either. I have condition overload on this build, but if you aren't intending to use a primer, prime pressure point also works because 4 slash heavy attacks are just so effective. As a slow weapon archetype, I've once again chosen to grab Prime Fury so that you don't have to deal with the kills needed for Berserker. Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds are still your standard on a 12x heavy build. Amalgam Organ Shatter still is there to help with a windup. The final 3 mods are where things change up a bit though. Reflex Coil is mandatory because we're stacking this with Zenric to get the cap 90% efficiency on heavy attacks from innate might so it barely depletes our combo. After that, I've opted for Gladiator Might to push our crits further since the weapon will be hitting at least yellows always. But you can also go for more range if you so choose. Just remember though that the follow through stat is a thing and you're unlikely to kill more than 4 enemies, maybe 5 per swing no matter what. You can also replace the Prime Bane with Prime Reach instead if you want to keep Gladiator Might but don't want to deal with swapping Banes. Either way, any of these works well. I'm just gonna slap these enemies a few times so you can see right out of the box it is pretty gross and one-shots them easily. Just keep in mind how follow through works. Even though I was getting 100 to 300k slash procs, I can't kill more than 4 of them reliably here with Ensnare. So let's move on to the meat of this weapon, the Glaive setup. There are a few things you should know. The only way to throw it is with a sliding heavy attack. It does not benefit from condition overload. It does not benefit from range. It also doesn't benefit from any melee based damage mods or Arcane Fury. It is affected by weapon damage mods though and Arcane Arachne. The projectile is somewhat slow and only travels 10 meters out. Basically, this is a Glaive version of the old Quasis. What you may find interesting is that this Glaive, like I said, has no follow through. This means with the ensnare that I'm showing you, group them up, you can one-shot all of them. It also has interesting implications elsewhere I'll show you later. So let's jump right into the build. This is the Glaive throwing build. As you can probably tell, we're almost exclusively using this with grouping abilities as range doesn't work on this weapon. We still have Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds because the combo system works with it. As I said, the IPS spread seems to be even, so I've chosen to slot Carnage Mandible to make it much more likely to be proc slash. Amalgam Organ Shatter is mandatory here to help with the windup. Because we want as much slash as possible, there are no other elements on the build, and Gladiator Might returns for more crit damage, as well as Reflex Cold to preserve our combo at 12x when we heavy slide. Since there are very limited mod options available, I've chosen to also double up on critical chance by slotting Sacrificial Steel. Since we're only taking heavy slots at DPS, we get double effect on this mod and it basically functions like a second Blood Rush with 440% bonus critical chance. Our Glaive has 235.2% critical chance in the end, meaning it will only hit oranges and a decent amount of reds. To push this ridiculous scaling even further, I've once again opted for a primed smite. If you don't want to be restricted to sourcing attack speed elsewhere, you can actually drop Gladiator Might for primed Fury. Now as we see, grouping enemies together with this works pretty well, and Snare lets you one-shot everything with the Glaive. Notice how they're taking 600k reds and 400k oranges. They basically aren't even living enough to see the slash take, which would be about 10 times larger, around 5 million. Actually, let's swap this to Dracar Manic Bombards and change the Bane. I have literally no buffs up besides just standard Blood Rush and Weeping, so let me get another melee out, and slide heavy. And there you go, 1.7 million slash tick. And here's the clip from the start. I hit a different body part I think in this one, but it wasn't the head. This one is a unpaused 5 million slash tick. As a reminder, you can't get stealth melee bonus in Simulacrum. This was removed last year in March with Scarlet Spear. So technically this means any frame can use this since all it requires is ensnare, right? Well, some choices are better than others, and Wisp is one of the best. Why? Let's take a look at our frame build quickly. This is a melee-focused Wisp. Prime Sure-Footed would go on the X list, but as you can see, I have 6 different configs on the Wisp already, and I don't want to screw up my polarities. As we are going Xeneric for Inner Might to reach 90% heavy attack efficiency, I'm slotting Swift Momentum to make combo building and sustaining it easier. This increases the combo duration to a full 11 seconds and also gives us some bonus heavy wind-up speed. Much appreciated. The rest of this build is what you would expect, a high amount of range, some duration, and some strength. The range also helps both ensnare capture as many enemies as possible so you can one-shot them, but also blinding them with reach surge as needed for survivability and some CC, which has much larger radius than ensnare. This is basically your oh shit button, but combined with Wisp being invisible on jumping, having her 2 available to draw aggro away from you, ensnare over her 4, and shock motes, you really won't have much issue surviving. The efficiency is only 100, but we are on Xeneric for Energizing Dash, and also have Arcane Energize accompanying Prime Flow, so you shouldn't have any energy problems. Vigor Swap and Arcane Arachne are also present on the build to boost your damage even further, but honestly I doubt this is really needed. Here, let's take a look. This is the max damage potential of the build. It's kind of ridiculous. And here's the clip from the start with that 61 million I nearly missed. Yes, these are yellow crit carryovers from Breach Surge. So basically, Wisp combines the CC, the grouping, and the attack speed. Technically, you could also infuse Breach Surge onto Korra instead, but the biggest thing you'll be missing are the haste motes to swing faster. You could also bring Roar if you want instant firepower, but that will take a decent amount more strength to be effective compared to Breach Surge. Now how about other frames? Well, we got Mag like I teased yesterday. This is the exact same build as my previous video, except I dropped Combat Discipline and Arcane Avenger for Swift Momentum and Arcane Strike instead. This gives us some more attack speed and wind up that you otherwise don't really have a chance of sourcing. Alternatively, you can just drop Gladiator Might again for Primed Fury if you so choose. That would also open up Arcane slot for Arachne if you really want to. The build also has Vigor Swap on it already. The DPS is just as strong as the Tenet Plasmor video I showcased you recently, but slash is much harder. We got the juicy range and some duration so the bubbles persist as crowd control when you're elsewhere. Some efficiency alongside Arcane Energize and slightly negative strength. This doesn't matter too much as the DPS is already so high, and the only reason why I slotted Umbral Intensify is to keep the pull on Magnetize strong. I didn't mention pets at all so far, but the natural option is just to take Panzer for endurance, survivability, and to source viral since Grigori doesn't have it on the build. So let's take a look at this one. You basically just magnetize, swap to your melee, and heavy slide. That's it. I mean, you can also prime with Epitaph if you really want to, but should be pretty obvious this isn't needed. Now we got another spicy melee that works well with Mag. It's essentially a pseudo-glaive for this purpose and outputs similar damage even though I can't use glaive mods. Yet another interesting synergy is on Zephyr. Why? Well, first the Jetstream augment projectile flight speed applies to the glaive as well, meaning now it flies much further and faster. We can essentially snipe enemies with it. Swift momentum is used once again to extend our combo duration and faster heavy swings. We don't need much duration, so this lets us build for 175 efficiency and ignore Arcane Energize. This also frees up a slot for Arcane Strike as well as Arcane Arachne. We're also bringing Vigor Swap again to buff our Grigori Glaive damage. Zephyr has a built-in ensnare in the form of Air Burst, and finally, actually, throwing the Glaive into a tornado will distribute all the AoE into it, and also multiplies its damage by 2 while extending its range. You basically have the whole package just like Wisp, except lacking innate attack speed, but we do have Arcane Strike. Because the helmet slot is free, you could infuse Warcry over Zephyr's 1 to source his head attack speed if you want to. I've Zadda's Whisper here instead because I was testing something if the Void proc from Grigori's 200% status would be able to keep it in place for multiple hits, but it seems the Glaive can only hit an enemy once while it's in range. You'll have to exit it and for it to double back for it to hit it again. It doesn't take damage like normal Glaive stuck in bodies do. So if anything, Zadda actually makes Grigori worse by not allowing it to travel through the entire crowd while also not giving extra hits beyond the first. The slash DOTs triggered also do not include the additional Zadda procs, so it really is useless. And instead, I'm going to opt for the Rhino on the other config, so let's just get to the showcase. You cast Jetstream, then you airburst some things and throw Grigori. The extra range makes it much easier to use, and that's about it. Or you could tornado things and throw Grigori. That also one-shots and actually does even more damage as it distributes all the damage in a bigger AoE and lets you nuke much larger crowds. But it is slower. Or you can combine both Airburst and Tornado to get everything in one place. All up to you. I have Roar on this build if you for some reason still want more damage, otherwise I would recommend Warcry. And in the end, honestly, there are so many other frames that can use this well. Take something like Loki, for example. Ensnare and Invisibility to stack the stealth damage multiplier. I do about 3 times more damage by going invisible and it completely breaks the enemy AI. Sure, you don't have anything else to work on, but because all this weapon needs is Ensnare, you could technically run it on any of your favorite frames, with varying levels of success. Me? That means I'd be using it on Volt. Volt is my favorite frames, meaning I'll be getting Volt speed for faster attacking and glaive throwing. I'll also get an invincible shield I can carry and throw the glaive through, which will also benefit from the shield's 2 times final crit damage multiplier. Finally, his 4 acts as a quick CC as needed for a getaway. Since I don't need much strength, I can build for more range. You would infuse Ensnare over as 1 as we don't want a bunch of extra electric weight from Shock Trooper. And the sound. I just love the sound of this weapon. And it looks good too. So what do you think? Not only does this weapon rivals Reaper Prime in functionality with much more base damage, like 200 versus 365, albeit weaker crits, but it also starts to creep into a pseudo-glaive territory for fun times and overcomes the biggest issue of non-glaives. The follow-through stat. Granted, it is still a bit clunky to use that way, and more range than just 10 meters ahead would be nice with how slow it travels that distance, but this is just a bonus gimmick, albeit a good one. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible, like I've done with covering the Tempest Starry update and the Sisters of Parvos mainlines. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. I'm also preparing to get you info first once more new war info drops. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and see you all next time.